Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more Viking stories, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from around the world. Your support helps us bring you more incredible historical tales. The morning mist clung to the rocky shores of the northern coastline like a protective shroud, obscuring the horizon where the endless sea met the grey sky. In the small trading settlement of Nordvik, nestled between towering cliffs and the churning waters of the fjord, life moved with the rhythm of the tides and the changing seasons. The settlement had grown prosperous over the years, serving as a crucial stop for merchants traveling between the great kingdoms of the north and the southern lands, rich with silver and exotic goods. Ingrid stood at the edge of the wooden pier, her woolen cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders as she watched the fishing boats return with their morning catch. Her father, Magnus the merchant, had built their family's fortune through careful trading and honest dealings with both Norse and foreign traders alike. Their home, constructed of sturdy oak logs and topped with a grass-covered roof, stood prominently on the hill overlooking the harbour, a testament to their success in these harsh northern lands. At 22 years of age, Ingrid possessed the kind of beauty that drew attention wherever she went. Her golden hair, braided with silver threads that caught the morning light, cascaded down her back like spun sunlight. Her eyes, the colour of summer sky over calm waters, held both intelligence and kindness that had endeared her to everyone in the settlement. Unlike many women of her station, Ingrid had learned to read and write from the travelling monks who occasionally passed through their lands, and she often helped her father with the complex calculations required for international trade. The settlement buzzed with activity as the day progressed. Fishermen mended their nets while their wives prepared the catch for preservation and trade. Children ran between the houses, their laughter echoing off the cliff walls as they played games passed down through generations. The blacksmith's hammer rang out in steady rhythm, forging tools and weapons that would be traded across the known world. Smoke rose from cooking fires and workshops, creating a hazy canopy over the bustling community. Ingrid made her way through the familiar streets, greeting neighbours and checking on the elderly members of their community. Her daily routine included visiting the homes of those who needed assistance, bringing food to widows, and helping with children whose parents worked long hours in the fishing boats or trading expeditions. This morning, she carried a basket filled with fresh bread and preserved fish to old Helga, who lived alone in a small cottage near the forest edge. "Good morning, dear child." Helga greeted her with a warm smile, her weathered hands reaching out to accept the basket. "You're too kind to an old woman like me." "Nonsense, Helga," Ingrid replied, settling down beside the elderly woman's hearth. "Father always says that a community grows strong when everyone looks after one another. Besides, I enjoy our conversations. Tell me, have you heard any news from the trading ships that arrived yesterday?" Helga's expression grew more serious as she poured steaming herbs tea into 2 wooden cups. "Aye, there's talk of troubled times in the Eastern Territories. Some say there are conflicts between different clans, and the trade routes have become dangerous for merchants traveling alone. Your father might want to consider hiring additional protection for his next journey." The old woman's words troubled Ingrid, though she tried not to show her concern. Magnus had been planning a major trading expedition to the wealthy settlements along the eastern coast, where he hoped to exchange their locally produced wool and preserved fish for silver coins and luxury goods that could be sold at considerable profit. The journey would take him away from home for several months, leaving Ingrid to manage many of the local trading arrangements. As afternoon approached, Ingrid returned to their family home to find her father deep in conversation with Olaf, his longtime friend and business partner. The 2 men sat at the large oak table that dominated their main hall, surrounded by scrolls of parchment covered with trade calculations and route maps. Magnus looked up as his daughter entered, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Ingrid, perfect timing," he said, gesturing for her to join them. "Olaf and I were just discussing the upcoming expedition. We've received word that the eastern markets are offering exceptional prices for quality goods, but the journey will require careful planning. Olaf, a sturdy man with graying hair and arms marked by years of physical labor, nodded gravely. The profits could be substantial, Magnus, but the risks have increased. We've heard reports of conflicts between various groups, and some trading parties have encountered difficulties along the traditional routes. What kind of difficulties? Ingrid asked, settling into a chair beside her father. Nothing that proper preparation can't handle, Magnus replied, though his tone suggested more concern than his words conveyed. We'll simply need to travel with a larger group and perhaps take a slightly longer route that avoids the more troubled areas. The conversation continued for several hours as they discussed logistics, potential profits, and safety measures. Ingrid contributed suggestions based on her knowledge of market conditions and her understanding of the relationships between different trading communities. Her father valued her insights, recognizing that her education and natural intelligence made her an invaluable partner in their business endeavors. As evening approached and Olaf departed for his own home, Magnus and Ingrid sat together by their hearth, watching the flames dance across the carefully stacked logs. The warmth was welcome after the cool dampness of the day, and the familiar crackling sounds provided a comforting backdrop to their quiet conversation. "Father," Ingrid said thoughtfully, "perhaps I should accompany you on this expedition. I could help with the negotiations, and my presence might make the other traders more comfortable. Many of them have known me since I was a child." Magnus shook his head firmly. "The journey will be too dangerous, daughter. I need you here to manage our local affairs and ensure that our regular customers are well taken care of. Besides, your safety is more important to me than any potential profits." "But I've traveled with you before," Ingrid protested. "I know how to handle myself in difficult situations, and I understand the business as well as anyone." "Those were different times," Magnus replied, his voice carrying the weight of paternal concern. "The reports we're hearing suggest that the situation in the Eastern Territories is more unstable than usual. I won't risk putting you in harm's way." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at their door. Magnus rose to answer it, revealing one of the local fishermen, a young man named Eric, whose boat had just returned from a longer expedition along the coast. "Magnus, Ingrid," Eric said breathlessly, "I bring news from the northern settlements. We encountered a trading party that had escaped from an attack 3 days ago. They lost most of their goods, and several people were injured. The leader said they were traveling along the coastal route when they were surrounded by a large group of raiders." The news sent a chill through both Magnus and Ingrid. The coastal route was considered one of the safest paths for traders, well-traveled and generally protected by the combined efforts of various settlements along the way. "Did they say anything about the identity of these raiders?" Magnus asked. "They weren't sure," Eric replied. "The attack happened quickly, and in the confusion, it was difficult to determine exactly who was responsible. Some thought they might have been displaced people from the inland conflicts, driven to desperation by the loss of their own homes and livelihood." After Eric departed, Magnus and Ingrid sat in contemplative silence, both understanding that this news significantly complicated the planned expedition. The potential profits remained attractive, but the risks had clearly increased beyond what they had initially calculated. "Perhaps we should postpone the journey," Ingrid suggested. "Wait until the situation stabilizes and the routes become safer." Magnus considered this carefully. "The problem is that waiting might mean missing the best market opportunities. The prices being offered now are exceptional, and by next season, conditions might have changed completely. We need to find a balance between caution and opportunity." Over the following days, Magnus spent considerable time consulting with other merchants and gathering information from various sources. He spoke with ship captains, traveling traders, and local leaders, trying to build a comprehensive understanding of the current situation. The picture that emerged was complex and somewhat contradictory, with some sources suggesting that the dangers were overstated, while others confirmed that significant risks existed. Ingrid, meanwhile, continued her daily activities, while keeping her ears open for any additional information that might help her father make an informed decision. She visited the harbor regularly, speaking with newly arrived traders and fishermen who might have encountered conditions along the various routes. Her conversations revealed a pattern of increased uncertainty and caution among the trading community. One afternoon, while helping to unload goods from a merchant ship that had just arrived from the southern territories, Ingrid met Leif, a young Viking warrior who served as protection for trading expeditions. Leif was tall and strong, with the kind of presence that commanded respect, but his manner was gentle and thoughtful rather than aggressive or intimidating. "I understand your father is planning a major expedition to the eastern markets," Leif said, as they worked together to organize the newly arrived goods. "These are challenging times for such journeys." "Yes, we've been hearing concerning reports," Ingrid replied. "Father is trying to determine whether the potential profits justify the increased risks." Leif nodded thoughtfully. "I've been providing protection for trading parties for several years now, and I can tell you that preparation and good judgment are more important than ever. The key is not just having enough warriors along, but choosing people who understand how to avoid conflicts rather than create them." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Magnus, who had come to inspect the newly arrived goods and discuss potential trading opportunities with the ship's captain. Ingrid introduced Leif to her father, and the three of them spent time discussing the current situation and the various factors that needed to be considered. "Leif has extensive experience providing protection for trading expeditions," Ingrid explained to her father. "He might be able to offer valuable insights about the current conditions." Magnus studied the young warrior carefully, evaluating both his apparent competence and his manner of speaking. "What would you recommend for someone planning an expedition to the Eastern Territories?" "First, travel with a larger group than you might normally consider necessary," Leif replied. "Second, choose your route carefully and be prepared to change plans if conditions warrant. Third, make sure everyone in your party understands that the goal is successful trading, not confrontation. Sometimes the best way to handle a difficult situation is to avoid it entirely." The conversation continued for some time, with Leif sharing specific details about recent conditions along various routes and offering practical suggestions for minimizing risks while maximizing the chances of a successful trading expedition. His knowledge was clearly extensive, and his approach seemed both thoughtful and experienced. As they talked, Ingrid found herself impressed not just by Leif's expertise, but by his thoughtful manner and obvious concern for the safety of the people he was hired to protect. Unlike some warriors she had encountered, who seemed to view their role primarily in terms of fighting prowess, Leif appeared to understand that true protection often involved preventing conflicts rather than winning them. Several weeks had passed since Leif's arrival in Nordvik, and the young warrior had become a familiar presence in the trading settlement. Magnus had ultimately decided to hire him to lead the protection for their upcoming expedition, impressed by both his experience and his thoughtful approach to the challenges they might face. During this time, Leif had demonstrated his value not just as a warrior, but as someone who understood the complex dynamics of trade, diplomacy, and survival in the harsh northern territories. The preparation for the expedition had become a major undertaking involving not just Magnus and his immediate household, but several other merchants from the settlement who had decided to combine their resources and travel together for mutual protection and shared costs. The group would include 12 traders, their goods loaded onto sturdy carts pulled by oxen, and 6 warriors led by Leif to provide security along the journey. Ingrid had thrown herself into the preparation work, helping to organize supplies, verify inventory, and coordinate with the various participants. Her organizational skills and attention to detail had proven invaluable, And even those merchants who had initially been skeptical about including a woman in the planning process had come to respect her contributions. One morning, as Ingrid was reviewing the final inventory lists in their family's storage building, she became aware of voices outside that seemed unusually urgent. Stepping to the doorway, she could see a small group of people approaching along the main path from the harbor, moving quickly and with obvious distress. The group consisted of a family of traders from a settlement several days to the north, their clothes torn and dirty, their faces marked by exhaustion and fear. The father carried a young child, while the mother supported an older boy who appeared to have an injured leg. Behind them walked an elderly woman who moved with obvious difficulty. Ingrid immediately called for help, and within minutes several residents of Nordvik had gathered to assist the newcomers. Magnus arrived quickly, followed by Leif and several other members of their expedition group. The family was brought into the main hall of Magnus's house, where they could rest and receive food and medical attention. "We are the family of Gunnar the trader," the father explained, once he had caught his breath and ensured that his family members were receiving care. 3 days ago, our settlement was attacked during the night. We barely escaped with our lives." The story that emerged was deeply troubling. According to Gunnar, their settlement had been approached by a large group of people who initially appeared to be travelers seeking food and shelter. The settlement's residents had welcomed them according to the traditional customs of hospitality, providing meals and places to sleep. During the night, however, the visitors had revealed their true intentions. They had systematically robbed the settlement of its stored goods, demanded that residents surrender their personal valuables, and threatened violence against anyone who resisted. Several people had been injured during the confrontation, and the attackers had made it clear that they would return if the settlement attempted to rebuild its prosperity. "They weren't ordinary raiders," Gunnar continued, his voice filled with both anger and bewilderment. "They spoke our language perfectly, knew our customs, and seemed to understand exactly how our community operated. It was as if they had been watching us for a long time, learning our routines and identifying our weaknesses." Leif listened to this account with growing concern, asking detailed questions about the attackers' appearance, their methods, and the directions they had taken when they departed. His questions revealed both his military experience and his understanding of how such groups typically operated. "How many people were in this attacking group?" Leif asked. "Perhaps 40 or 50, Gunnar replied. "Too many for our settlement to resist, especially since they had the advantage of surprise and had gained our trust before revealing their intentions." "Did they take everything, or were they selective about what they stole?" "They seemed most interested in portable valuables, silver jewelry, fine weapons, and high-quality cloth. They took some food supplies but left the heavier items like farming tools and household goods." This detail was particularly significant to Leif, suggesting that the attackers were not desperate refugees simply trying to survive, but organized groups with specific goals and the ability to transport stolen goods efficiently. Magnus and the other merchants exchanged worried glances as the implications of this news became clear. If organized groups were systematically targeting trading settlements and using deception to gain access, then the risks for their planned expedition were even greater than they had initially calculated. "We need to reconsider our entire approach to this journey," Magnus said quietly to Leif and the other expedition leaders. "If these attackers are as sophisticated as Gunnar describes, then traditional security measures may not be sufficient." Leif nodded gravely. "We'll need to assume that any strangers we encounter could potentially be hostile, regardless of their initial appearance or behavior. This will make the journey more difficult, but it's necessary for everyone's safety." Over the following days, Gunnar's family recovered from their ordeal, while the expedition members revised their plans. The route was changed to avoid areas where such attacks had been reported. Additional supplies were acquired to reduce the need for resupply stops, and new protocols were established for dealing with encounters with unknown groups. Ingrid found herself spending considerable time with Gunnar's wife, Astrid, helping to care for the injured family members and listening to more detailed accounts of their experience. These conversations revealed additional troubling details about the sophistication and organization of the attacking group. They had clearly planned everything carefully, Astrid explained as she tended to her injured son's leg. They knew exactly where we stored our most valuable goods, which houses belonged to the wealthiest families, and even which residents might be most likely to resist or cooperate. How could they have learned so much about your settlement? Ingrid asked. We think they sent scouts ahead, people who visited us over the past few months, claiming to be ordinary travelers or traders. Each time, we welcomed them and shared information about our community, never suspecting that they were gathering intelligence for an attack. This revelation added another layer of complexity to the security challenges facing Magnus's expedition. If the attackers were using advanced scouts to gather information about their targets, then even careful route planning might not provide complete protection. Leif spent considerable time discussing these new developments with Magnus and the other expedition leaders. His experience told him that they were dealing with a more serious threat than ordinary bandits or desperate refugees. These people are operating like a military organization, he explained during one of their planning sessions. They have leadership, strategy, intelligence gathering, and coordinated execution. We need to respond accordingly. What do you recommend? Magnus asked. First, we need to change our departure plans. Instead of leaving as a single large group, we should split into smaller parties that travel separately and reunite at predetermined locations. This makes us less visible and reduces the impact if one group encounters problems. Won't that also reduce our ability to defend ourselves if we are attacked? Not necessarily. Smaller groups can move more quickly and quietly, making them harder to track and ambush. And if we coordinate our movements properly, the separate groups can support each other when needed. The revised plan was complex, but offered several advantages. The trading goods would be distributed among 3 separate groups, each traveling with different timing and routes, but all heading toward the same ultimate destination. Leif would lead the security for the group carrying the most valuable items, while other experienced warriors would accompany the remaining groups. Ingrid had been following these discussions with growing concern, not just about the dangers facing the expedition, but about the broader implications for their community and their way of life. The attacks described by Gunnar's family represented a new kind of threat that could fundamentally change how trading settlements operated. "Father," she said during one of their evening conversations, "perhaps we should consider whether this expedition is truly necessary. The risks seem to be increasing every day, and we have enough resources to survive comfortably without the additional profits." Magnus considered his daughter's words carefully. The same thoughts had occurred to him, but he also understood that avoiding all risks could ultimately be more dangerous than accepting carefully calculated ones. "If we allow fear to prevent us from conducting normal business," he replied, "then these attackers will have achieved their goal even without directly targeting us. Our prosperity depends on maintaining trading relationships and continuing to participate in the broader economy. But what good is prosperity if it costs us our lives or our freedom? That's exactly why we're taking all these precautions and hiring people like Leif to provide protection. We're not ignoring the risks, but we're not allowing them to paralyze us either." Their conversation was interrupted by Leif, who had come to discuss some final details about the expedition's security arrangements. As they talked, it became clear that he had been thinking about the same fundamental questions that troubled Ingrid. "I've been considering the broader implications of what we learned from Gunnar's family," Leif said. "These organized attacks represent a new kind of threat that could affect the entire region. Individual settlements and trading expeditions might need to start working together more closely to provide mutual protection." "What do you mean?" Magnus asked. "I mean creating networks of communication and cooperation that allow communities to share information about threats, coordinate their responses, and provide assistance to each other when needed. The attackers are organized and coordinated. We need to be equally organized in our response. This conversation planted the seeds of an idea that would later prove crucial to the safety and prosperity of Nordvik and its neighboring settlements. But for the moment, the immediate concern was completing the preparations for their trading expedition and ensuring that everyone involved understood both the opportunities and the risks they were undertaking. As the final departure date approached, Ingrid found herself spending more time with Leif, discussing not just the practical aspects of the journey, but the larger questions about how their society might need to adapt to changing circumstances. She was impressed by his thoughtful analysis of complex problems and his ability to see beyond immediate tactical concerns to broader strategic implications. "You think differently than most warriors I've met," she observed during one of their conversations. "My father taught me that true strength comes not just from skill with weapons, but from understanding people and situations," Leif replied. "The best way to protect people is often to help them avoid dangerous situations entirely." "That's exactly what I've been trying to tell my father about this expedition. But sometimes avoiding one risk creates different risks," Leif continued. "Your father understands that isolation and inactivity can be just as dangerous as bold action, especially for a trading community that depends on maintaining relationships with distant partners." The morning of departure arrived with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The first group, led by Olaf and carrying primarily wool and preserved fish, had left 2 days earlier. The second group would depart this morning, while Magnus, Ingrid and Leif would travel with the final group, carrying the most valuable goods and leaving the following day. As Ingrid watched the second group prepare for departure, she noticed a commotion near the harbor. A small boat had arrived during the night, carrying 3 travelers who appeared to be merchants from the Eastern Territories. Their presence was unusual, as most traders from that region typically arrived by land rather than sea. Leif appeared beside her, also watching the newcomers with interest. "Something about them seems strange," he said quietly. "Their boat shows signs of hasty departure, and they're carrying very little cargo for merchants." "Should we be concerned?" Ingrid asked. "Probably just cautious," Leif replied. "But given what we've learned recently, I think it would be wise to learn more about their circumstances before we finalize our own departure plans." The 3 travelers were brought to Magnus's hall, where they were offered food and the opportunity to rest. Their leader introduced himself as Thorvald, claiming to represent a trading consortium from the eastern markets. His story was that they had traveled by sea to avoid the overland routes, which had become dangerous due to the increased activity of raiders and displaced populations. "The profits from eastern trading remain excellent," Thorvald assured Magnus and the other expedition leaders. "But the journey requires more careful planning than in previous years. We've developed new routes and methods that avoid most of the dangerous areas." As Thorvald spoke, Leif noticed several details that troubled him. The man's clothes, while well-made, showed signs of recent rough treatment that seemed inconsistent with careful sea travel. His hands bore fresh cuts and scrapes that suggested recent physical conflict. Most significantly, his knowledge of Eastern market conditions seemed less detailed than would be expected from someone actively involved in that trade. "What specific goods are commanding the highest prices?" Magnus asked. "The usual items," Thorvald replied somewhat vaguely. "Quality textiles, preserved foods, metal goods. The demand remains strong across all categories." Leif caught Ingrid's eye and saw that she had also noticed the visitors' evasive responses. Her education had taught her to listen carefully to people's words and evaluate the consistency of their stories, and something about Thorvald's account didn't seem quite right. That evening, after the visitors had been provided with sleeping accommodations, Leif approached Magnus and Ingrid with his concerns. "I think we need to be very careful about these newcomers," he said. "Their story has several inconsistencies, and their appearance suggests they may have encountered more difficulties than they're admitting." "What kind of inconsistencies?" Magnus asked. Their knowledge of Eastern market conditions is surprisingly general for people who claim to be active traders in that region. Their boat shows signs of hasty departure or possible conflict, and their eagerness to encourage our expedition seems excessive for people who should be concerned about competition. Ingrid nodded. I noticed similar things. Their responses to specific questions seemed rehearsed, and they avoided providing details that genuine traders would normally share freely. What do you think we should do? Magnus asked. Keep them under discreet observation tonight, Leif replied. If they're genuine travelers who have simply encountered difficulties, they'll behave normally. If they have other intentions, they might reveal them when they think they're unobserved. The three of them agreed on this approach, with Leif taking responsibility for the overnight surveillance. He positioned himself where he could observe the building where the visitors were staying, while remaining hidden from their view. Around midnight, Leif's caution proved justified. The three visitors emerged quietly from their sleeping quarters and made their way toward the harbor, moving with the careful stealth of people who didn't want to be observed. Leif followed at a distance, maintaining visual contact while staying hidden in the shadows. At the harbor, the visitors retrieved something from their boat, a bundle that appeared to contain signaling equipment. They then moved to a high point overlooking the settlement and began making what appeared to be coded signals toward the sea, using a small covered torch that could be seen from a distance but was unlikely to be noticed by casual observers in the settlement. Leif watched this activity for several minutes, confirming that the visitors were indeed engaged in some form of covert communication. The implications were clear and deeply troubling. Nordvik was being scouted by the same kind of organized group that had attacked Gunnar's settlement. Moving quickly but quietly, Leif returned to Magnus's house and woke both the merchant and his daughter. The situation had become urgent, and immediate action was necessary to protect both the settlement and the planned expedition. They're not traders, Leif reported grimly. They're scouts for an attacking force, and they've just sent signals out to sea. I think we can expect visitors sometime before dawn. Magnus's face grew pale as he realized the implications. How many people do you think we're dealing with? Based on what happened to Gunnar's settlement, probably 40 to 60 attackers. Too many for our settlement to resist if they achieve surprise, but possibly manageable if we're prepared and organized. What do you recommend? Leif's mind was already working through the tactical situation. First, we need to quietly alert key members of the community and organize our defenses. Second, we need to deal with the scouts before they can provide additional intelligence to their associates. Third, we need to prepare for the possibility that this attack is specifically timed to coincide with our planned expedition departure. The next few hours would test not just Leif's skills as a warrior, but his ability to organize and lead a community's defense against a sophisticated and dangerous threat. And for Ingrid, the abstract discussions about risks and security measures were about to become a very real test of survival. Please, spare me from pain, she whispered quietly, understanding that the peaceful life she had known was about to change forever. But as she looked at Leif's determined expression and her father's resolute bearing, she also understood that they would not face this challenge alone. Leif heard her whispered plea and turned to face her directly. I give you my word, he said solemnly, his voice carrying the weight of a sacred oath. I will defend you with my life, and I will not allow harm to come to you or your family. This I swear by my honor and my ancestors. The vow was made not just to Ingrid, but to everything she represented, the innocent people of the community, the peaceful way of life they had built, and the future they hoped to preserve despite the growing dangers around them. 5 years had passed since that fateful night, when Leif's vigilance had saved Nordvik from the coordinated attack. The warning he provided had allowed the settlement to prepare its defenses and coordinate with neighboring communities, ultimately driving off the attackers and capturing several of their scouts. The information gained from these prisoners had helped identify and dismantle the entire network of organized raiders that had been terrorizing the region. The crisis had also sparked the formation of the Northern Trading Alliance, a cooperative network of settlements and merchants that shared information about threats, coordinated security measures, and provided mutual assistance during difficult times. Leif had played a crucial role in organizing this alliance, earning recognition as both a capable warrior and a thoughtful leader. Magnus's trading expedition had ultimately proceeded as planned, but with enhanced security measures and coordination with the alliance network. The profits had been substantial, but more importantly, the journey had helped establish new patterns of cooperation and communication that made future trading much safer and more efficient. Ingrid had emerged from the crisis with a deeper understanding of both the challenges and opportunities facing their community. She had worked closely with Leif to develop many of the Alliance's organizational structures and had become recognized as a skilled negotiator and administrator in her own right. The relationship that had begun with Leif's oath of protection had gradually developed into something deeper and more personal. Their shared experiences during the crisis and their continued collaboration in building the alliance had revealed their compatibility and mutual respect. 2 years after the attack, they had married in a ceremony that celebrated not just their union, but the bonds of community and mutual support that had enabled their survival and prosperity. Now, as Ingrid stood once again at the harbor, watching the fishing boats return, she carried their first child and looked forward to a future that seemed both more secure and more full of possibilities than ever before. The settlement had grown and prospered under the protection of the Alliance, attracting new residents and expanding its trading relationships. Leif approached from the direction of the Alliance meeting hall, carrying reports from settlements throughout the region. His role had evolved from warrior to coordinator, helping to manage the complex network of relationships and resources that kept their communities safe and prosperous. "Good news from the Eastern Territories," he reported, wrapping his arms around his wife. "The trade routes are completely secure now, and several new communities have requested membership in the Alliance. And our child will grow up in a world where cooperation and mutual protection are normal parts of life," Ingrid replied, placing her hand over his. "That's the greatest victory of all." Indeed, as the sun set over the peaceful harbor, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, they stood together, looking toward a future built on the foundation of that sacred oath, the promise that people of goodwill would always stand together to protect what they valued most. The Vikings' vow had been kept, not just through individual acts of courage, but through the creation of lasting institutions and relationships that would continue to protect and nurture their community for generations to come. In choosing cooperation over conflict and community over isolation, they had found a path to prosperity that honored both their traditions and their hopes for the future. Thank you for watching this Viking story. If you enjoyed this tale of honor, protection, and community, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more incredible historical narratives. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love connecting with viewers from around the world. What did you think of Leif's oath and the way the community came together? Share your thoughts below.